Welcome to today's video. In today's video we're using this silly pen to sketch with soluble ink. We're going to use our soluble ink, a little wash of water, to produce this moody, quick, fun sketch, and maybe even add some watercolors at the end. Soluble ink is the normal ink you get in your fountain pens. It's the kind of ink we say never use because it will wash away, it will blend, bleed and smudge when you come with your brush and add some water. But today I'm going to show you that's all nonsense. With a little bit of soluble ink, a whole lot of fun, we can have a great time sketching basically any scene, any object. And really it's an amazingly quick process. And like that, let's just jump in. The reference is down below and I'll talk you through every step of the way. Just like any sketch from myself, I'm going to start with simple shapes. So we've got this sort of perspective laden scene going down this little street in Suffolk where I was meeting friends the last weekend, and we can still find within this lovely perspective laden Suffolk street, that's a tongue twister isn't it, we can find our shapes. So I'm just going to move around and find our approximate shapes. Now this ink, we shouldn't get too attached to it because what's going to happen, well, we're going to apply a wash to it and lots of it is going to move, but not all of it. The wash will be controlled and there'll be some randomness, you know, how the ink decides to move and where the ink decides to go and just how much it flows will be a little random. But there'll also be a lot of control, where we put the water, how much water and things like that. And if we choose to try and rescue something that's happening we didn't like or not. So we don't want to get too attached. We don't want to spend too long doing too perfect a sketch because it might all become washed away to some extent. But we also want to start thinking about a couple of key things. Now the first is the shapes, the key structure on our page. And that's going to be things like this bold outline here. This bold outline is going to be my frame. It's going to be the edge of my painting. The other bit of structure is the perspective, so getting things flowing in the right direction. And of course you've got little shapes, big shapes, and all those other things that we normally talk about on this channel. The other thing though we want to start thinking about is ink loading. So literally we are loading up our page ready for the ink to be moved around. And what that means is we are thinking, how hard are we pressing? So here we've got the eaves, that's a shadow. I can press really hard here because it's going to make a bold line. There's loads of ink there. And when I come back, I'm going to be able to create a more impressive shadow. Similarly, you can see a shadow running across the road here. So if I just load my page up with ink, not too much, that's probably a little too much. I'm exaggerating for emphasis. But if we load up that page, we'll find we're able to create a lot more variation. So instead of just thinking, oh, I need to get my sketch right. Instead, we're taking a little bit of pressure off getting the sketch perfect because we know we're going to wash it around and move it around. And we're thinking already about how we're going to achieve a bit of tone, a bit of value in our scene. In particular with how much ink are we laying down onto our page and in what places are we popping that ink. Again, we've got structural elements. So here, this roof, that's going to be another frame. And you can now hopefully feel those frames pushing in on the scene like a little window looking forward. And we can find other elements to just fill up what's going on. And there we go. If we just complete a little bit of the bottom of this house, kind of trying to match it slightly. This house is more distant and it is up a hill. Not up a hill, but it's slightly raised compared to this one. So we are expecting a little bit of that raised feeling, but just trying to match it so that it feels okay in our scene. And like that, our very quick sketch is taking shape. And you know what? It sort of looks all right, doesn't it? It looks about right. So we pop our pen away. That is our shapes segment done. And I'm going to grab this sword liner brush. And here we're going to be judicious, but we're going to apply plenty of water. And look at that activation and how beautiful it is already. We can be very specific, so we can come into these windows and look. This is the element of control we have. We can just apply tone to one area. We can apply tone to one half of an object here. All these chimneys can suddenly get shape. equally we can apply looser colours and look at these amazing textures developing in that ink as it washes up. We've got this real gradient. Same over here. What we might want to do is actually just dibble and dabble, trying to get some of that sensation of the leaves. And where we apply the water relative to the line is going to affect where the ink flows. Notice how this line is all flowing this way. That's because we've come and touched it on this side. As the paper gets wet, it might smudge a little bit off to the other side, but broadly, by controlling where our water is, we're going to control the flow of ink. Now if we work our way onto the other side of the street, here, look, all light, you can see that in the reference. Here it's mostly dark, so we can be a lot braver and just pop our water across, creating that colour, creating that tone. Again, a quick line across, not scrubbing, not trying too hard, and we'll get that lovely little tonal variation going quickly. Do the same there, and now in our trees we can create a bit of light and dark as well. We also talked about the shadow on the road, and we'll find if we activate all of that ink underneath, we're able to bring forward that shadow. And then we've got little areas left, haven't we? Just little bits. And this process is all so quick. It can feel like it's running away from us at times because of how quickly we can do it, but also it's just a wonderful way of very quickly creating a dramatic scene. And we could literally just go, this is done. But we're not. Today we're not going to do this. Today we're going to add some extra touches. So we're going to see how we can apply a bit of colour. We're going to see the challenges with colour, but we're going to see the joy of colour in this kind of painting as well. So firstly, a little bit of quinacridone magenta. What I'm trying to do is get this bright sort of pinky red feeling, and perhaps that quinacridone magenta is a little too pink, so I'm going to add a little bit of pyrrole scarlet in, trying to move it slightly towards orange. And what you can see is actually this colour applies quite cleanly, as long as I stay away from untouched lines. Now as soon as I get towards some of the lines, say down here, around the door, you might notice the colour easily becomes just a tiny bit sort of mucky, a little bit muddy. Not too much yet, but you can easily imagine how, without being careful, without taking a slower approach to painting here, we'll end up with very muddy colours, which is something we typically don't want. In fact, I think we could pretty much say almost never want. But if we're gentle, if we avoid a little bit of touching the lines too much, it gives us a slightly different look to what we normally expect of our line and wash painting, but it gives us a lovely look nonetheless. Over on the other side, we've got a more sort of yellowy feel, and here we almost want some of that muddiness, but you'll see, because we've washed all that ink, it's actually now fairly stuck down. So even if I wash all across, we can see our yellow remains actually fairly clear, fairly transparent. It's not mixing too much with the ink, because having washed it and having had that all dried down, we don't have a lot of excess ink on the page. So we've got a nice shadow underneath our watercolours rather than getting muddy watercolours. And this is the awareness you need to have when you're painting, having sort of used these processes. You just need to have an awareness what's likely to happen. And be prepared, of course, as with all watercolours, to be surprised, because there'll be something unexpected that does happen. And that's fine. That's what gives you those happy accidents, those lovely bits of painting you couldn't control, what just sometimes creates a bit of magic, but can also, of course, be a little frustrating. I'm just going to come round and sort of add a little bit more sort of tonal stuff with my deeper colours. I've got this lovely green here, or at least what I think's worked quite well as a nice green, and I'm using just some shadows to embolden some of those ink shadows. We can enrich the shadows beyond just that simple wash. A little bit of green on this wall as well. Don't want to overdo it because I haven't explained that green colour with the ink, but a few touches hopefully will just bring it to life a little bit. You can get these greens here, just little gestural marks, and also, last but not least, well, maybe not even last, a few little touches in here just to amp up the kind of road-like textures and the feeling of shadow in here as well. And there we go. So what's left to do? Well, what might be quite nice, we've got this big open sky. Let's splash some blue in there. And to get that more moody feel, I'm going to pop some lavender in. Just aware that this whole image, because we painted it with soluble ink, is going to have a more moody feel. So we're going to play into that. What you might notice as we layer these things up, because we washed away the ink, a lot of the ink is a little more timid than we might want it. So like with any process that I do, like with my normal process I should say, what we're going to look to do is let this dry and then come back and restructure things. So we've kind of gone from the broad shapes, we've washed those shapes to create an initial loose picture. We've added some more careful, deeper colours, and we're going to come back, step 4, to applying some ink and structure again. And here we are, we're back and we are pretty much dry. A few wet areas, but mostly we're touch dry. And you can see, look, because we washed that colour away, then we went on top with watercolour, in places we've lost our initial shapes. And that's great, because it gives us a chance to come back and restate them and re-embolden things. And all we're going to do is recreate the marks. Maybe we move some. You see I moved this wall a little bit. Gives us a chance to sort of correct things that we felt, oh, maybe before we could have done that differently. Also gives us a chance to be more controlled with our ink. Now that we are not going to apply loads of wash on top of it, we can go, you know what, we care more about this because we're not just going to be getting rid of it. We're not just going to be sort of washing it away and letting it live the rest of its life somewhere else. So we can be a little more controlled, a little more careful, a little more detail oriented, perhaps adding little simple textures. We can also, if we want, again, think about ink loading and think about whether we want a second layer of colour or a second layer of water, second layer of shadow. So little hatching across the road. Perhaps we're thinking, oh, maybe we will come and leave that as texture or come back and wash it across again. Here we'll restate some of these bold lines, get these shapes back, respond to what's happened, just come around some of these lines and make sure we've got everything back in order as we want it. Not overdone, not over bold, but just enough to feel right or to feel how we want it to. Coming round, little touches in these windows, maybe even hatching in a couple of places as well. And maybe do a little bit more hatching here, a little bit here, just separating out some of these vertical and horizontal planes. A bit bolder there, and get these maybe little touches to suggest some kind of texture going on in that building as well, where all that greenery is. And like that, I think if I just concentrate now on loading the ink a little bit more, we're ready to have that promised play, which I've been alluding to at least. So I'm going to come back one more time with my brush, and this time using a really small brush we can apply very controlled touches to our ink, activating it but not sort of washing it away. This time just really focusing on creating specific areas of darkness. So here we can really specifically activate this line and create a little shadow under the eaves, not losing all that definition to our ink. A little bit will get lost, of course, just a little bit, but it won't all get lost. Here we can be more generous and boisterous, just moving things around, softening some of the lines, and maybe that's all we need to do. We can even neaten up edges here. Look, where this has got a little white area, we can just wash the ink, soften it in, and move things around. Same down here, look, we can wash that, fill in these little white areas, which perhaps don't quite make sense because we know there's sort of tone going on behind there. And like that, let's call this really simple experiment done. Just a different way of sketching and painting using soluble ink, not feeling the need to go out and buy really expensive different stuff. Instead, using what you have on hand, the stuff which comes with your fountain pen, and having a fun play. If you enjoyed this video, you might enjoy these ones, and I'll see you in the next. So thank you everyone for watching my little sketching videos. If you enjoy my content, please do subscribe to my channel because it makes me really, really happy. Thanks again.